Rosenberg, and he'll be presenting a topic called In Search of Whooping Cranes, a trip to the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge. These are some pictures of some whooping cranes that actually Bill pulled up, I believe. Here's some adults in flight. A close-up of an adult, what the whooping crane looks like. They're similar to some other cranes, but they're a little different. They're a little more distinctive. And here's a juvenile, which doesn't look anything like mom and daddy. About our speaker today, it's Ed Rosenberg. Ed's from Houston, and he graduated from Galena Park High School. He has BS and MS degrees in wildlife management from Texas A&M University and an MS in chemistry from the University of Houston. He's taught high school science for 6 years, and then he worked for ExxonMobil for 29 years before retiring. Ed's lived in Sun City for 15 years. He's always had a fascination with nature and animals. He's currently the co-chairman of the Nature Club Bird Special Interest Group, and he's chairman of the Butterfly Special Interest Group. I'm going to turn it over to Ed now, and he can present his program.
Thank you, Steve. I got the idea for this program the end of February. Our church seasoned citizens group went on a trip down to the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge to see the whooping cranes. Our Becky McCauley, who's the leader of our seasoned citizens group, put together, got arranged for a church van and got it set up with hotel rooms down in the Rockport Fulton area. And so we get started here. We went down to Aransas National Wildlife Refuge in search of the whooping crane. Okay. Whooping cranes. They're one of our rarest birds. Right now, there's probably about 870 or so of them in the world. It's the tallest North American bird. Stands around 5 feet tall, or maybe a little higher. That is, for the average person, about between 5 and 6 feet tall. If you had a whooping crane in front of you, you'd probably almost be eye to eye with him. With him having a 6-inch dagger aimed at you. They weigh up to 16 to 18 pounds. They're white, black wingtips. The juvenile has rusty head and neck, a mottled back. They fly with their neck and legs outstretched. That's probably the key way you can tell a flying crane from a flying egret is the cranes always have their neck outstretched. Egrets and herons have a neck in an S-shaped curve, and their black tips on their wings are visible only in flight. Whooping cranes nest in marshes near the tree line in Wood Buffalo National Park in northern Alberta, Canada. They travel in family groups, and usually two adults and 1 or 2 juveniles. Whooping cranes always lay 2 eggs, but generally speaking, only one of the eggs hatches and the young survives. Whooping cranes have never been numerous. One source I looked at said there probably never have been over 10,000 of them. Here's a picture of a whooping crane flying with 3 sandhill cranes. The sandhill is one of the second largest birds we have here, along with the great blue heron, which stand about 4 feet tall. You can see the all white body with black wingtips. There are 4 other birds that possible to see down on the Texas coast that have black wingtips. One is the wood ibis or wood stork, the snow goose, the American white ibis, and the American white pelican. Now, I don't know if any duck hunters are watching or not, but the snow goose is the only one of these 5 birds we mentioned that can be legally shot. The others, they will have substantial fines. You know, if you shoot a whooping crane, it's sort of like harming a giant panda in China. You know, they arrest you and your family and you're executed. So, Aransas National Wildlife Refuge was established in 1937. It's set aside to protect migratory birds and vanishing wildlife of coastal Texas. The diverse habitats attract over 400 species of migratory birds. In 1941, there were only 15 whooping cranes. All of them wintered in the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge. And in that time, since that time, there have been concerted efforts to try to bring the whooping crane back. They were charter members of the Endangered Species Act in 1973, along with the bald eagle, the peregrine falcon, the osprey, and Sasquatch. In 2018, there were more than 500 whooping cranes for the first time since the late 1800s. And the winter of 2019 to 2020, there was an estimated 503 cranes that wintered along this stretch of the Texas coast. This is the largest of 4 population of whooping cranes in North America. It's the only self-sustaining whooping crane population. It's the only one that lays eggs and produces young. And the goal of the Fish and Wildlife Service is to reach 1,000 birds, maintaining a stable population of at least 1,000 for 10 years. And this is one criteria for moving them off the endangered list to the threatened status. And this is estimated at current rates, it should be accomplished by 2030. Here's a map, North America, showing where the different whooping crane flocks are. One is the wood buffalo Aransas flock. This is the one that winters in Aransas National Wildlife Refuge. Then in the spring, it flies up to Wood Buffalo National Park in northeastern Alberta. And in the fall, returns to Aransas. Another is the Wisconsin-Florida migratory flock. This one flies from central Florida to central Wisconsin every year. This is an introduced flock of birds introduced into Florida, and they're led each year by a person flying a ultralight aircraft. They've been trained to follow the ultralight aircraft from Florida to Wisconsin and then back in the fall. Then there's a non-migratory Florida flock of about 9 birds that is present all year in south central Florida, but it's they're about to give up on this flock because They're not reproducing. And there's a non-migratory flock in southern Louisiana. It's about 69 to 70 birds. And again, it is not really reproducing. These 3 flocks here have to have young introduced that have been raised in captivity. A lot of this is done up at the International Crane Institute in Wisconsin. And the young are basically raised by hand. One thing they may do is go up to whooping crane country up in Alberta, where they're mentioned whooping cranes lay 2 eggs, but only raise 1 young. And they will go up and remove some of the eggs from the whooping crane nest and bring them back and raise them in captivity. And people dress up like whooping cranes and have like a sock puppet on their hands to feed the young birds so they don't get imprinted on humans. There's 159 whooping cranes in captivity, makes a total of around 825 to 850 whooping cranes alive today. Now, we loaded up in our church bus and drove down to Aransas. We got there in the afternoon, stopped at the headquarters building to pay our fees and go into the refuge. Notice that these are temporary buildings, and they had a little disturbance called Harvey back in 2017. The headquarters building evidently was damaged by the torrential rainfalls they had out of that. They were worried to death that that Harvey was going to damage the marsh just before the whooping cranes got down to the refuge, but the marsh was fine afterwards. One thing you have to remember is that the marsh grasses and plants and the whooping cranes have evolved over the last 10,000 years or so to withstand hurricanes. Okay, so we load up on the bus, drove down to one of the viewing docks to try to see whooping cranes, and we may have seen one about half a mile away. You see a white thing out in the marsh grass, but couldn't get very good looks on it. But we did see some interesting birds like great blue heron, the second largest birds in North America. Black vultures and turkey vultures were very common there, along with crested caracara, who was sitting up with the vultures, and he was rather camera shy because every time I bring my camera up to take his picture, he'd duck behind this limb. And this is what the adult caracara looks like. Here's a snowy egret. We got a real good look at and good picture of, and they have black legs and yellow feet, or as birders say, black legs and yellow socks. Here's the bane of many Sun City residents. Here, the 9-banded armadillo is a common resident in Aransas, as well as white-tailed deer. And you can see here that the white-tailed deer on the refuge down there are about as concerned about people as the deer here in Sun City. Well, we went home that night, got a good night's sleep. Got a seafood dinner, and then had a good night's sleep, and got up the next morning and went to the Rockport Fulton docks and boarded the skimmer. This is a very well-known tour boat that takes people out to see the whooping cranes. I think it costs $85 a person. It's a 3.5-hour trip, but it's well worth the money if you have never done it. Anybody interested in nature, I think, should go down and take this trip because it's interesting. They're very knowledgeable. They point out all the birds to you. November through March is when the whooping cranes are there, and I think they require at least 10 people before they can take the boat out, but the boat is almost always full. This is a boat, the skimmer. It's like a big cabin cruiser. It's got a enclosed cabin on it with seating inside for about 25 people. There's a viewing platform here on the bow, and also up on the upper deck, if people can go up with their telescope or cameras and try to get better views and better photos of the whooping cranes. On the way out, we had a look at a Laughing Gull. It's probably one of the 2 or 3 most common birds along the Texas coast. And we got a good look at several brown pelicans. You know, the interesting thing, the brown pelican is also a comeback kid along the coast. During the 1970s, there were virtually no brown pelicans on the Texas coast. They had been affected by the DDT and other persistent pesticides like the bald eagle, peregrine falcon, and the osprey. But after the regulations were placed on the use of persistent pesticides, it was hoped that the brown pelicans would start coming back. Now, I went on the Freeport Christmas count for about 30 years, and we never saw a brown pelican, I think until about 1983 or 4, and we the Christmas scout in there, we saw 1 brown pelican. And then over the next few years, there were more and more showed up in the later 80s. And one weekend in 1990, we took my son's Boy Scout troop down to Galveston Island. They were camping out at Fort Travis State Park. And I saw a couple of brown pelicans fly over, and I said, I'm going to count and see how many brown pelicans come by today. And I stopped at 749. So the brown pelican is back, and right now it's one of the easiest birds to see on the Texas coast. One thing, it's big, and there's a lot of them. This is the habitat we're looking for. There's marsh grasses and reeds that grow in the salt marsh there in Aransas Wildlife Refuge. And going out, we saw our first bird right here, a coot, and everybody's familiar with coots. We have a lot of old coots in Sun City. And finally found a whooping crane right there. It's about a quarter of a mile away, but they're obvious by the size of their body and also their neck. They have a very big stout neck. And here's another whooping crane right here, along with some great egrets. And we finally got a glimpse of one flying past. Here you can see the outstretched legs, his neck, and the wet black wingtips. And here's a family group of 2 adults and the young. She's tell by the rusty head, tail, and modeling on the back. Oh, and another thing about whooping cranes, when you see them, it looks like they're wearing a bustle. Here's a little bit closer look at that. This is an eared grebe right here in front. And finally got a good look at a whooping crane. And he's out looking for breakfast, and he's found it. At one of their favorite foods in Aransas is the blue crab. He took it over and began dismembering it, and like people, the first thing he ate was the pinchers. That's part that's got the juiciest, most succulent meat in it. And then went back looking for more breakfast, and after that we saw a number of whooping cranes. Most of them were like this guy, looking around and catching more crabs. And finally found a pair. This evidently is a mated pair, and whooping cranes mate for life, but if something happens to one of the pair, then the surviving member will find another mate. And after 35 or so whooping cranes, they grew to be trash birds, so we began looking for other things. And this little spot here, this little body of water, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 northern pintails, and here's a couple of willets. But the northern pintail is one of the handsomest birds, I think, in North America. It's a chestnut head, white throat, and breast, gray sides, and these long flowing feathers. And of course, its trademark characteristic is this long, slender tail feather. It gives them the name pinfield. But God did a good job when he made this one. And then along a similar body of fresh water, there we saw a number of great egrets there. Here's a couple of American white pelicans coming in for a landing, and they caught them and a couple more in the same body of water. Just apologize for the fuzzy picture. Here's a 13 great egrets there, and here you can compare a great egret to a whooping crane. You can tell the difference in the body shape, the neck size, and the egret has a yellowish bill. The whooping crane has a dark bill, and there's some double-crested cormorants taking off or swimming around here in the water. As we turned and kind of changed direction a little bit and went out into the bay, there were a number of sandbars and oyster reefs out there. And this one, there were a number of American avocets, these white birds with the rusty head. That's a willet. That's one of the larger sandpipers we have on the coast, and this is a northern shoveler duck here. And an oyster reef, we saw there's 4 Forster's terns and a laughing gull. Then we got good looks here at some hooded mergansers, which are really attractive ducks. They kind of turned in formation and started swimming kind of toward the boat. And here's a little bit better look side view of them. The male is a very striking bird with these black and white markings and rusty sides. The female is, I think, is attractive too. She's got her hood extended there. And out in a little bit deeper water, we found redheads. Here, these two ducks are redheads. These two ducks are ringneck ducks. Of course, this is an example of ornithologists' habit of naming a bird after its least obvious field mark. They do have a little brown ring of feathers around their neck, but you can't see it unless you have them in your hand. I think a ring-billed duck might be a better name for them. And this is a willet. It's a big gray sandpiper, and then this is one of our larger sandpipers. This is a marble godwit. Has a long, slightly upturned bill for probing around in the water, in the mud, looking for small fish and crustaceans, and also bill is kind of the right shape for probing in like holes for water-dwelling worms and little crabs like the fiddler crab. Got a real good look at an osprey. One of the birds mentioned a while ago that went for a while was on the endangered species list because of DDT. And he took off and came back around, and I guess he was doing people watching. He was checking us out. And almost anywhere in Texas, you'll find great-tailed grackles. But down on the coast like this, you need to check the great-tailed grackles out kind of closely because it might be a boat-tailed grackle. Now this one of the differences between these two birds is the boat-tailed grackle has a very distinct crown on his skull and also a dark eye, whereas the great-tailed grackle has a very flat skull and a yellow eye. And saw several more different kinds of wading birds. This is I learned it as a Louisiana heron back 40 years ago when I started bird watching, but this is a tricolored heron. This is a reddish egret. This roseate spoonbill and white ibis. A little bit larger picture of the white ibis. They use that long bill right there to find worms, crustaceans, shrimp, insects, and other small aquatic and marine animals. They they probe around in the water. You can see this water is a little bit muddy. They probe around with that beak and they can feel the food organisms and snap them up very quickly. And the roseate spoonbill, this is where he gets his name, spatulate beak, uses that beak to scans his beak back and forth in the water, and using the very sensitive tissues in his beak. Whenever he comes in contact with something like a small fish or a shrimp or other small marine organism, his beak will snap to and catch it. And the color of the roseate spoonbill results from the crustaceans, like the shrimp and other crustaceans that eat. This tends to causes the pink color in its feathers. It's, if when you boil shrimp, they turn kind of pink. It's the same thing happens here when they digest the shrimp. The red color shows up. Here's a couple of them feeding. Once again, the spoonbill's feeding. There's the reddish egret again. Sorry, I chopped his head off. There's a snowy egret. Looks like he's having a bad hair day in the wind. And then notice out in that body of water, I noticed a little duck out there, and I can see white on his head. And it got better looks through binoculars and a telescope and found that they were buffleheads. This is the smallest North American duck. It's about 8 inches long. It's very cute. And I think they're probably my favorite duck. And this flooded area up on the little island there, you can see black spots out there on this hot body of water. Looking through telescopes, we're able to see several different kinds of ducks swimming around out there. And ruddy ducks, northern shovelers, American widgeons, and gadwalls swimming around. And later on an oyster reef, we found a ring-billed gull, so-called, because this band of black around the tip of his beak. And we found 3 different kinds of terns at this one spot. This one is a royal tern. It has I don't know if you remember Larry Fine of the Three Stooges. He's got looks like a hairdo, kind of like Larry Fine's hairdo. The royal tern has a yellowish or orangish beak. I think we decided this was a female right here. And there's had a Caspian tern. Caspian tern has a heavy, very bright red beak. And these smaller ones are Forster's terns. The saying, one good tern deserves another. And another oyster reef out there were a number of American white pelicans roosting on it, along with several cormorants and our little friend the osprey here. And further down the oyster reef, there was an oyster cat. Not much to catching an oyster. I mean, they're not going to run away from you. But I think oyster eater or something like that might be a better name, but I don't make those choices. Here's what he looks like a little bit closer up. He's got this long, laterally flattened beak. It's at the end of it shaped kind of like a screwdriver, and he can get that beak down in between the shells of an oyster or a clam and snip the adductor muscle, which opens and closes the clam shells, and then you can eat the meat inside the shell. And one source I read said that typically an oyster catcher will eat about 100 pounds of clams and oysters in a year. This is a long-billed curlew. It's the largest sandpiper we have in Texas. It's got this long curved beak, which happens to be just the right length and shape to probe around in fiddler crab burrows and worm burrows in the water. And so good things have to come to an end. So finally we had to go back in and dock there at the Rockport Fulton docking docking place there. And this is Becky. She's was our tour guide, person that set everything up for us. Anyway, she's there taking our picture as we end our quest for the whooping crane and other birds. So that's our story. Now, before I go to questions, I'd like to show you a few more slides about something else that's coming up. Our 13th annual Georgetown Andice Christmas Count, which will be December 17th, a week from this Thursday. And what is the Christmas count? Well, it's part of citizen science. Citizen science is where lay people go out and make contributions to science by their observation. Now, there's two fields that scientists, official scientists accept information from just regular people like us, at the astronomy and bird watching. Now, the Christmas bird count takes place between December 14th and January 5th every year. You count birds in a 15-mile diameter circle. The count is sponsored by the National Audubon Society, and your data, you just don't give them a list of something they look at and throw away. The data on these is compiled into databases, and it's used by scientists. And we'll talk about that more in just a minute. Christmas count got started on Christmas Day in 1900. A man named Frank M. Chapman, who published a birding book magazine, which later became the official bulletin of the National Audubon Society. Mr. Chapman proposed a Christmas Day bird census instead of a hunt. People used to go out on Christmas Day and try to shoot everything they saw so they could tell what birds were there or what small animals were there on Christmas Day. But he suggested instead of hunting them and killing them, they count birds. And so that Christmas Day in 1900, there were 27 birders participated in 25 Christmas counts from Toronto, Canada to Pacific Grove, California. And they produced 90 species of birds that day. Now, this count has been held now for 120 years. This year's the 121st count. Thousands of volunteers count up to 60 million birds each winter. Each count occurs, I mentioned a while ago, in a 15-mile diameter circle. The decades of data can show long-term trends of early winter bird populations. The data helps scientists understand how birds are faring amid environmental changes. The changes in numbers in different bird species over time may be the first Indication of environmental trends. They're sort of like canaries in the coal mine. Watch List 2020 states that there are many species in mainland US and Hawaii are very imperiled. And this is based partly on information from the Christmas bird counts. In the 2018-2019 Christmas bird count, these are held in the Western Hemisphere, North America and Latin America and Pacific Islands. There were 79,425 observers in 2,615 count circles, and 1,974 were in the United States. They found 2,368 species, and that constituted 48,700,000 individuals. That sounds like a lot. That's actually low over what it was 7 to 10 years ago when they were getting 60,000 individual birds during the course of a year. Now, the Georgetown Andice Christmas count occurs within this 15-mile circle that's centered on the entrance to Sun City, where Del Webb meets Williams Drive. Now, if you really want to know how precise, it's latitude 30.6999 degrees north and 97.739 degrees west. Now, the count circle is divided up into 7 areas. Area 1 is in between the south bank of Lake Georgetown and the South Fork of San Gabriel River. Area 2 is between the north bank of Lake Georgetown and Berry Creek. Area 3 is bounded on the north by Berry Creek, on the east by I-35, on the south by Texas 29, and on the west by DB Woods Road. Area 4 is north of Berry Creek. Area 5 is north of the South Fork of the San Gabriel River and east of Highway 35. Area 6 is down here south of the San Gabriel River, and Area 7 is Sun City. Birders are asked to count in one of these 7 areas. We try to provide experienced birders in each area to help with identification. Now, I ask people if they'd like to participate. They say, well, I don't know the birds that well. I'm just not that good at identifying them. Well, I tell them what we need is eyes out there. There'll always have an experienced birder with you to tell you what a bird is. But we need people to look around and see the birds. The more people we can have in the field, the more birds we're going to see. Now, in each area, a list of birds that are previously reported or expected in the Georgetown Christmas bird count is provided to observers. And if people don't feel like they can ride in a car for several hours or walk a path or walk an area to look for birds, are encouraged to report bird sightings from their yards, from their bird feeders, and send, if the people want to do that, they're encouraged to report those sightings to Martin Byhauer. Now, if they were interested, they can email me and I will send them a checklist that they can get their sightings from. Now, birds that are in bold print on this checklist that are not listed on the checklist require documentation. That means that you have to be able to describe the bird well enough that a reasonably knowledgeable birder can tell what you're talking about, what birds you saw. I mean, but saying like shape, size, color, habits, and one of the best documentation is a photograph. You know, nowadays with digital cameras and cell phones, it should be easy to get a photograph of a unusual bird like that. You know, documentation does not say, well, I saw a sage thrasher because it looked just like the one I saw up in Colorado last summer. That's not a documentation. But I don't, you know, we don't know what you saw in Colorado last summer. But if you're interested, I'll give you contact information in just a moment. Our count last year, 2019, on December 14th, we had 34 participants and had 94 species, which was very low. This was the first time in 12 years we'd had under less than 100 species. But hoping we'll do better this year. So, remember, it's December 17th, 2020. Contact me or Martin Beihauer if you have, if you would like to participate. Martin is the area leader for Sun City. And if you want to be a feeder watcher, contact me at my email address, and I will send you a bird checklist. And if you'd like to bird somewhere else other than Sun City, I could probably hook you up with one of the other area leaders. But anyway, if you're interested, contact me or Martin and get ready for our Christmas bird count.
So Ed, that was wonderful. I lived in Rockport for a long time, and I'm going to tell you, I went back this year and did that Whooping Crane tour that you talked about. It was a horrible day, and I thought we'll see nothing, and it was probably the most exciting tour I've ever taken. So I think everything, I think everything you said is true. I just think it's wonderful, and people have quite a few questions. They want to know, somebody wants to know, the Sun City Photo Club wants to know, are whooping cranes especially shy?
Well, that was really my first experience being, looking for whooping cranes. And the boat came up in some cases, within 10 yards of them.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that where they nest and where, in Canada and where they spend the winter down on the coast, I think they're so isolated. It's it's not easy to get to where they are. They don't see people that much, and I think they're just kind of blow us off.
Do they only lay 2 eggs per year?
Yeah, they lay 2 eggs, and only one hatches and lives to become a juvenile and adult. And that's why the places that raise them, to introduce them somewhere else, this is why they may go up and take eggs. They tried a couple of times putting whooping crane eggs in sandhill crane nests, and I'm not sure exactly how well that has worked.
Are there places where you can observe around Rockport without going on, by water? Places for land lovers where you can do bird observations?
Well, you can go to the park, to the refuge They have several viewing platforms that you can walk out on that are, most of them are raised about 10, 12 feet up above the marsh. And you can see the whooping cranes. You probably need a good pair of binoculars, at least 8 power, and or a spotting scope to be able to get a look at them.
Okay, and that area is probably about 20 miles from Rockport by car, I would say.
Yeah, it's right outside the town of Ostwell.
Okay. What's the lifespan of whooping cranes?
I'm not sure. I think it's probably something like about 20, 25 years.
It's a nice long time. Good. Maybe some will still be there when I go back. Some of the same ones. Are there alligators that are a threat to the sleeping cranes in Texas?
Probably not. Alligators are mostly fish and turtle eaters.
Okay.
They're not as aggressive toward land dwelling animals as crocodiles.
Sure. What is your favorite bird?
My favorite bird?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd have to say a couple of ducks. I mentioned the pintail and the bufflehead a while ago, and one I really like. I'm not sure why, but is the Tennessee warbler, which is a fairly plain-looking little bird. I just think they're neat.
Well, several people have mentioned that they like your dry sense of humor. And Martin also mentioned that you to please check recent Nature Club posts for information about how to participate from home in the bird count. And I know that you're planning on having a Zoom setting, like a Zoom meeting where people actually report all the birds that have been seen. And that's going to be on the 17th. And I think you're planning on maybe sending out an invitation to everybody in case some of the folks here or other ones within the membership would like to come and hear about what birds, that everybody saw. So you'll be receiving an invitation to that.
I would like, as soon as I get the information, I'll send, the information you send me out to the area leaders, and they can tell their people about it. And then maybe we could ask Mr. Wagoner to put that information out to the membership as a whole.
Well, that'd be great. Then everybody'd have a chance to see it. Well, Ed, we want to thank you again for a wonderful program. And it's something, if you haven't had a chance to do this in your life, really think about doing it. You'll remember it forever, I promise. Thank you again. And now we're going to go back to Steve.